Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road Journey. This week I'm still in Hampshire, a county that, as we established last week, is very nice to look at and it's full of hard-working, clever people. I'm sure it'll be much of the same this week, but we are visiting Southampton, so yeah. Not only will we be visiting Southampton, we'll be making several stops along the way to look at many interesting things on a journey that starts in Winchester and ends in Lymington. As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and hi!
I'm Ed Winchester.
Which is where we begin. In the days of my guidebook, Winchester was a busy city with over 28,000 residents, and Winchester is considered the capital city, if you will, of Hampshire. I don't really know why. I can only assume it's because it's well old and has just been here for a while. In fact, Winchester, or the area of Winchester, has been inhabited since the prehistoric times, but things really took off when the Romans came along in 70 AD and established Winchester as a town. Winchester is perhaps best known because of its cathedral, and indeed my guidebook recommends we take a look. It's an impressive structure that started to be built in the year 1079, but it proved to be nothing but a pain in the arse, with various problems occurring, such as the tower's collapse during construction. It was mostly finished by the mid-1100s, but over the next few centuries various additions and extensions were made, the last of which was made in the 1640s. This resulted in, give or take, the structure that we see today. It's had a few restorations over the years, but the main part is still the original 1100s built structure. It's 170 metres long, making it the longest medieval cathedral in the world, but it very nearly wasn't a cathedral at all. In the early 1900s, it was looking like the cathedral was going to collapse because it was sinking into the ground. It turns out that the Normans who started the build on the cathedral in 1079 used a foundation made up of layered tree trunks set about a soft layer of peat. After several hundreds of years, some of these tree trunks had rotten through and the foundation was no longer able to support the cathedral structure, so it started to sink. It was saved by digging out some of the ground around the cathedral and chucking in a load of concrete and bricks to give it a more solid foundation, and if you bear with me just one moment... Yep, still here. We're going to head out of Winchester now, and to do so we'll be using what used to be a Roman road. In the days of my guidebook it would have been the A34, but today it's known as the B3335, whatever, a road, and this road will take us past what was known as Bushfield Camp, found to the south of Winchester. Built at the start of the Second Small Disagreement, Bushfield Camp was a military training barracks constructed on what was previously farmland. It was used by the King's Royal Rifle Corps, which means they had guns and a firing range on site. After the war, the site was used to store army records and as accommodation until the 1970s, at which point the Ministry of Defence abandoned the site, with its official closure coming in 1978. In more recent years, the site has been earmarked for redevelopment, but everyone's arguing the toss over how that should be done, resulting in nothing being done. A short distance from Bushfield Camp is the village of Twiford, and more specifically Twiford Waterworks, built in 1898. Unlike most waterworks, Twiford not only extracted the water, it also had a water softening facility which utilised lime to soften the water. Accordingly, the waterworks had its own lime kilns and they quarried out the chalk they needed at the same site. The only external material they needed was a bit of coal, which was moved around the site via a 2-foot railway. Due to its unique nature, historic architecture and contents, the site became a scheduled monument in 1973, ensuring its preservation. Within the waterworks are some of the original boilers and steam engine pumps dating back to 1906, which are still operational, and on certain days throughout the year it's opened as an industrial heritage museum which you can visit. Interestingly, the original borehole that supplied the waterworks is still in place and in use today as a water supply, although more modern machinery is used to bring the water to the surface, and apparently they can draw 23 million litres of water every day. Fascinating, but let's crack on, and we're heading to Southampton next. Whilst it's a bit fiddly to get to, we can follow our period correct maps without any major diversions, so that's good. Southampton is well known for its maritime history, so I'm heading to the waterfront, where surely we'll find a glamorous seaside pier with fish and chips. No, not really. The best I can do is this rundown piece of garbage known as the Royal Pier. It was opened by Princess Victoria in 1833, and at the time it was known as Victoria Pier. Immediately it ran into issues due to little crustaceans known as gribbleworms. They're quite fond of a bit of wood for dinner, and they set about consuming the pier, resulting in its foundations having to be rebuilt 5 years later. Initially, the pier was used with transportation in mind, but in the 1890s, the pier was rebuilt out of iron and expanded so that it could be used as a pleasure pier. Work would be completed by 1902 and no doubt featured a fish and chip shop, an amusement arcade and pavilion theatre, standard pier procedure. Surprisingly though, the pier was never damaged in a storm or by a fire, unlike all the others, but during the first small disagreement, a ship did crash into it, but with more pressing issues at the time, it wouldn't be rebuilt until the early 1920s. The pier would finally close in 1979, I don't know why, but since then it's sat here rotting away, with local residents calling for its renovation, but I reckon just f*** it off at this point, look at the state of it. In the days of my guidebook, Southampton was huge, with a population of over 160,000 people, and this is mostly owing to it being a port city and a major player within the shipbuilding industries. However, Southampton goes back a lot further than that, and my guidebook suggests maybe we'd like to visit Bargate. This is Bargate, a medieval gatehouse that was built in 1180-ish, and at the time it was the main entrance to the city of Southampton. Over the years, its primary use has mainly been as a prison or a courthouse, but in the early 1900s, nobody gave a toss because it was considered for demolition. Put simply, it was in the way of road traffic and a tramway system that the Southampton Corporation Tramway Company were building. Annoyingly for them, in the end, they weren't allowed to demolish Bargate, which caused a huge issue because you can't fit a double tram line through the narrow space, meaning it was nothing more than a bottleneck for trams. But perhaps more importantly, the tram design of the day didn't even fit through the archway. This led to the creation of the Bargate tram. It featured smaller wheels so as to lower the tram's height, but it also featured an enclosed upper deck with a rounded roof so that it would all fit under the archway without a problem. Interestingly, the Bargate tram was designed in 1923, the same year as my guidebook's publication. Time to head out of Southampton and on to our next destination. On the way, we'll cross over the River Test on the A35, which isn't correct according to our period correct maps, but the original road and bridge is no longer accessible, so we've no choice. Although interestingly, the old bridge does still exist. Our journey takes us along the A326, which today has a section known as the Hythe Bypass. In the days of my guidebook, this didn't exist, but interestingly, the old road that it replaced remains mostly still in situ, running alongside the bypass. I suppose if they just widened this old road, it wouldn't have worked too well as a bypass. There's a school just there and various other road exits and entrances and connections, etc. A right turn off the A326 brings us to Bewley. In the old days, a tiny village with only around 1,000 residents. Rather bizarrely though, the population in Bewley has actually decreased over the years. Today, there's not that many more than 800 people living here. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit Bewley Abbey, but nah, Bewley is home to the National Motor Museum, so if you're coming here, do that instead. The National Motor Museum opened in 1952 and houses an impressive collection of all things automotive. However, I'd like to mention the museum's monorail system, which apparently was England's first monorail, opening in 1974, but there seems to be some doubt as to whether that's true or not. It features a 1-mile track which will take you on a 10-minute ride around the Bewley Museum site, but most interestingly, it will take you directly over the museum exhibits, allowing you to view everything from above, which is marvellous. Our last stop for the day brings us to Lymington, a port town that, according to my guidebook, is noted for yacht building, and that's certainly still the case today. Yep, a lot of yachts. However, before this, Lymington's key industry was salt. What with there being seawater right there, one can simply extract the salt and job would be described as a good one. That would have been done at a place like this, known as a saltern. They trapped seawater in shallow lagoons where it would then evaporate off, leaving a brine. This brine was then pumped into a heating system which would evaporate off the rest, leaving nothing but salt. To generate the heat, they used coal-burning fires, and it's said that at its peak, the salt industry in Lymington was using more coal than the entire city of London, which is an incredible amount considering Lymington was only a small town with around 4,000 people. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'll be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John. You've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.